Hello, it's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the entire Miami Marlins organization. From the first moment I first met our next speaker, I knew I would eventually introduce him at the Miami Book Fair. And although it's only been 5 minutes, I assure you that my appreciation for his talents go far beyond that. Mitch Albom is an internationally renowned and best-selling author, journalist, screenwriter, playwright, radio and television broadcaster, and musician. His books have collectively sold more than 35 million copies worldwide, have been published in 49 territories and in 45 languages around the world, and have been made into Emmy award-winning and critically acclaimed television movies. His Tuesdays with Morrie has become the best-selling memoir ever published. In 2010, Mitch received the Red Smith Award for Lifetime Achievement by the Associated Press Sports Editors. In 2013, Mitch was inducted into the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Hall of Fame. Mitch operates 9 charities in Southeast Michigan under his Stay Detroit umbrella and an orphanage in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Before we bring our next speaker on stage, we're going to start with a video.
It's a mystery, man. Will it ever be solved? Frankie Presto.
Then the way he died was so mysterious.
He was performing,
Started to rise up.
it's the perfect death for Frankie Presto. Who was this guy? Was he one of us? Did he come from some other place?
He was an orphan in Spain.
Being in Detroit, looking for his mom, and he came to New York and broke all kind of records.
He just sticks his head in the door, and our first reaction was, hell, he is fine.
Every time I know you've done me wrong, here you come and sing your old song.
Those aren't Elvis's moves. Those aren't James Brown's moves. Those are Frankie Presto's moves.
He was leaping up in the air. It was like Nureyev.
Say no, no, honey. Say no, no, honey.
I feel like even if you took the guitar away from him, he would still musically influence me.
Frankie Presto was like Thelonious Monk. That he knew how to play for the people, and he also knew how to play the music.
It sounds beautiful now, and it's going to be beautiful 50 years from now.
I mean, he had these magic fingers and these magic strings.
When he started playing, there was ghosts in the house.
If one string during a performance turned blue, the story goes that it had a profound effect on somebody's life.
There were these great stories about Frankie.
I would hang around this local music shop.
We were looking for a guitar player.
I'm in this monastery in Spain.
I heard somebody playing something.
When he walked in, so that's Frankie Presto.
Then I saw a musician, Frankie Presto.
He was my music teacher. I didn't know he was Frankie Presto.
It's like seeing a pimp in a nunnery.
Never in a million years would I ever think that this guy would walk into an audition with Kiss.
He would disguise himself and teach in Staten Island.
You didn't know what was true, what wasn't true.
The night that he was performing with Elvis and Elvis didn't show up.
I took him to a party with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
I thought about him telling me that I should be an entertainer, and the words I wrote down was, today I met the boy I'm gonna marry.
He'd been on an island.
I heard he went to Woodstock.
Visiting the Dalai Lama or someplace in Nepal.
Maybe he had a nervous breakdown.
He'd done one movie.
No, he made half of a movie.
If they looked and couldn't find a birth certificate, nothing would surprise me.
What do you know about the so-called legendary recording, The Magic Strings of Frankie Presto?
It's bootlegged.
I've never seen it. I never heard it.
Mythical, amazing compilation.
He was not aware that he was being recorded.
I've heard there's as few as 15 copies.
I'm not going to say that I don't have one, but I'm not going to say that I have one either.
Frankie was a shaman.
Magical.
It's just extraordinary.
He was playing to God.
Frankie Presto was the greatest.
It was incredible.
Special.
Heavenly, mystical,
Powerful.
legendary.
It was death-defying.
And then he vanished.
On behalf of the Miami Marlins organization, it is my honor to introduce and welcome back to South Florida, Mitch Albom.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you. Nice to be back here in Florida. Thanks for that warm welcome. Sorry we're running a little bit late. Some of you know that I used to work here about 30 years ago. Yeah, it's more than 30 years ago at the Fort Lauderdale News and Sun Sentinel. Is it still there? Good. We had to see one newspaper still standing. All right. So I'm a big believer in little things happening for a reason and thereby turning your entire life. I'm kind of a walking example of that. I don't think if I hadn't flipped on a television set and seen an old professor of mine talking about dying from Lou Gehrig's disease 20 years ago that I would be sitting here right now in front of you. In fact, I'm pretty sure of it. So I got to thinking about how many times that's happened in my life. And it didn't just begin as a person sitting in front of a television set with Maury. It goes actually all the way back to when I was a kid. When I was about 8 years old, my mother's brother, my uncle, lived in New York, and he got a brand new piano. And as a result of him getting a new piano, we got his old piano. It was sent down to our house. It arrived, this mysterious thing, wheeled inside, taken down to the basement. My older sister got piano lessons and quit. My younger brother got piano lessons and quit. And then they turned to me and they said, why waste the money? He's just going to quit. So I got no piano lessons. And of course, as those stories always go, I was the one who kind of wandered down to the basement, hearing the siren's song of this weird instrument that had arrived, and started to bang around on a piano. So now when I was 8 or 9 years old, and I don't know if this thing's going to work because I haven't played it, but when I was 8 or 9 years old, I did pretty much what every 8 or 9-year-old does when you get in front of a keyboard, right? And that was always followed by a slam of the basement door by my parents upstairs who didn't want to be bothered. And I always credit them for my sense of percussion because that's how I learned the beat. It would go, be quiet. You know, so you get a sense of rhythm, all right? Then as I got a little bit older, a couple more years passed, and I discovered, I got better at playing by banging around and listening to things. And then so, of course, as every 10 or 11-year-old, not only did I learn heart and soul, but by learning those 4 chords, I essentially learned every single rock and roll song from 1955 to 1963. They are all within those 4 chords. If you don't believe me, let's see. You know that one? Well, that's that. You ever hear the Bristol Stomp? Well, what's that? Same chords, right? How about, right? Why must I be a teenager in love? That's all that. So, I joined an oldies band because I was well equipped. I had 4 chords. And we proceeded to tour around all through high school. It was a great way to go through school because I never had to dance. I was playing at the dances. And so, you were always the cool guy up on stage, and you never had to actually learn how to do any of those dances. And by the time I was finished with high school, I had made my mind up that I was going to go into music. That was going to be my field. I had found my calling. I knew what my profession was going to be. I informed my parents. And of course, being the son of Jewish parents, they said, that's wonderful, that's great, what a terrific profession, you're going to college. So I went to college. But the whole time I was in college, I was under that great Jewish moniker, something to fall back on, you know. Most people aspire to go to college, and then there's the Jewish families that say, it's always something to fall back on you. So while I was in college, of course, I met Maury Schwartz, and so that turned out to be very, very fortuitous in my development and my life path. But I never wrote anything. I mean, my whole idea was I was going to get out and I was going to go into music. And I finished college, and that was my plan. I was going to go to New York. I was going to take over the music scene by storm, you know. But first, I was going to do what everybody back in college in the 70s did, go backpack across Europe. Right? Have your little adventure, do that, and then you come back and start your career, okay? So I went backpacking across Europe. Had a great time, went with a buddy of mine. We're winding down the trip. We're down to the last few days. We're supposed to go over to Athens, Greece. He decides he wants to go home and doesn't have any money left. So he says to me, as we are in the port city of Brindisi, Italy, which you take a ferry from Brindisi, Italy over to Piraeus, Greece, with your Eurail pass, and then you can go to Athens. He says to me in this little port city at about 10 o'clock at night when he's deciding to leave, hey, I don't have any money. Can you give me some money and you can get some wired over to you and, you know, when you get to Athens? And I said, yeah, like an idiot. And so I gave him all my money. I had $3 left, but I had a Eurail pass, so I was invincible, right? Because when you get a Eurail pass, you can go anywhere you want. So I have this Eurail pass. He takes off. 11 o'clock at night, I'm waiting for the ferry. And I get online, I give them my Eurail pass, and they say, oh, we don't take that anymore. I said, what do you mean? It says in my Let's Go Europe here that you take it. Oh, we stopped taking it 2 weeks ago. Well, what do? You have to buy a ticket. Well, how much is a ticket? $40. I had $3, $37 short of getting on the boat. Tried to beg from everybody in line. They were all college kids like me. They weren't giving me any money. So all I had was this pass. So I ran back to the train station, got on a train, and proceeded to try to get from the south of Italy back to Athens, Greece on land. Those of you who are geographically sound know that that's not an easy thing to do. You've got to go all the way up through Italy, all the way through the north, out into what was then called Yugoslavia, all the way across Yugoslavia, where they kept pulling me off the train because what was an American doing in Yugoslavia at that time? And I kept saying, I'm just trying to get to Athens, Greece to get my money wired to me. And they said, shut up, get back on the train. So they took me down. I finally get to Athens 3 days later. I haven't eaten, I haven't showered, nothing. I've got nothing. I don't even have the $3 left, nothing. I get off the train, so I have to walk across town. It's like 100-degree heat. I get to the bank at 10 after 5 on a Friday. Come back on Monday. So why am I telling you all this? Because I told you, everything happens for some type of reason. I'm stuck now in Athens, Greece. I managed to finagle my way into a youth hostel by promising them I'll pay them. I give them my watch, and I said, I'll pay you on Monday. I'm lying on the bunk bed of a youth hostel. Bottom bunk, someone is up above reading a paper out loud, and they're reading all these different things. It's an English language newspaper in Greece, and they read this ad. And they say, hey, this looks like a cool ad. It says, wanted piano player for luxury resort on the island of Crete. So I say, let me see that. They hand it down. I look at it, and that's exactly what it says. It's got a phone number. I have nothing to do for 3 days. So I say, I'll call the number. I have an adventure. Called the number. Woman says, yes, can you come for an interview? I said, sure. When? She said, 2 o'clock. It was 1 o'clock. I said, okay. She gave me the address. I figured now, piano player, luxury resort, there's going to be a line out the door, right? Get down there. Nobody there. I'm the only person. Walk in, it's an office. There's no piano. There's no anything. It's just a desk and an office. The woman behind the piano says, you play the piano? I said, yes. I couldn't. How would she know? And she says, you drink? I said, do I drink? You have drinking problem. I said, no problem. No. She said, okay, you fly tonight, you go audition. I said, fly where? She said, you go to Crete. And she sits down and proceeds to write me a plane ticket. These were in the days, you may remember, back in Europe, you could write, if you had an account, you could write your own plane ticket, which must have been great for terrorism now that I think about it. So she gives me this ticket, and I have to go to the airport literally from there. So she gives me some money because I explained my situation to her. I take a cab across town. I stop at a department store. I run in. I grab the first cheap blue suit off the rack. The guy says to me, hey, I fixed for you. I said, I don't have time. He gives me 10 safety pins that I can safety pin up my pants and safety pin up the sleeves, which I do in the cab. I get on the plane. I fly to Crete. Now, remember, I only got to Greece for the first time in my life the day before. Now I'm flying to some island I couldn't find on a map if you gave it to me. I land in Crete. It's pitch black out by this point, and I have a piece of paper from the woman with the instructions. I walk out. I find the first cab driver I can find. I hand him the instructions. He reads it, goes, oh, American, good. This was in a time when other countries actually liked America overseas. That also was a hard thing to remember, but once upon a time that was true. So I get into his car and we start driving along, and constantly he's driving, he keeps looking over, he said, American, good, America, good. I said, just keep your eyes on the road. So we're driving along and I see the sea out there, and it's kind of dark, and all of a sudden he takes a sharp right turn and we go into the woods. Now the car's starting to bounce along and it's slowing down, and I'm seeing trees are getting thicker and thicker, and I look out the window and there's chickens on the ground, they're squawk, squawk, and they're running all the way, and then he slows the car and he stops the car and turns off the ignition. And I'm thinking, my obituary is going to read, former student found chopped up with chickens in Crete Forest, you know. But he gets out and he points to this house in the woods, and it's got a light on, and apparently he is taking me home to show his wife that he has an American in the car. So we go into his house, and he yells the Greek equivalent of, honey, I'm home. And out steps this woman with an apron, and she's cooking dishes. She goes, oh, hello. He says, American, good. She goes, see. We're doing that like semaphore thing. See, no, good. And I go, no, time. She goes, oh, doxy. She grabs a big giant chicken, a giant watermelon, and all these slices of feta cheese, and she gets in the car with us. And now we're driving together, and she's feeding me over the back seat. She's giving me chicken legs and wings. She gives me slices of watermelon with feta, which if you've ever had it is fantastic. If you've never had that combination, that is a Greek specialty. So I'm dribbling all over my nice blue suit with watermelon juice and chicken juice. And we pull up to this resort. I get out. I'm supposed to find a Mr. Peter Papadopoulos. That's his name. That's all I know. So I ask. Up steps this guy, kind of burly, older guy, white hair. He's holding 2 drinks. He says, you the piano player? I said, yeah. There's the piano, go play. I look over, and there's this huge lounge with all kinds of people smoking cigarettes and drinking whatever, and there's a piano sitting in the middle of it. It's Friday night. So he's staring at me. I have no sheet music. I have nothing, you know, so I do what every piano player worth his salt who has ever found himself in this situation would do. After I get done playing Misty one time, I play it a little faster the next time, a little faster, a little slower, a little bossa nova. You know, about 60 different versions of Misty, because I don't have any other sheet music with me. And I do all right. Somebody puts a cup down, they put some drachmas in it, I'm doing okay. And then Mr. Peter Papadopoulos comes up to me and says, okay, come with me. Now, he's drinking. I think, what is going on? And we go down to the Taberna, this little nightclub there, and there's what I call like a Greek oompa band. You know, I don't know if you see some of the Greek bands on the islands, but it's like, everything kind of goes like that, right? So this is what they're listening to, and they're playing, and the place is packed. And I finally find out that it's his birthday, and on your birthday in Crete, everyone has to buy you a drink, and you can't refuse. So he is in the bag. And after eating something, he sees I'm looking at the band, you know, trying to figure out this, and he says, do you sing? And I said, well, yeah, I sing a little bit. Go sing with the band. I said, that band? He said, sing with the band if you want the job. So I have to get up, walk up to this band who has no interest in seeing this American from out of town, and have to be translated. And they say he has to sing with the band because Mr. Peter Papadopoulos wants it. So the piano player was this really cool guy who I eventually got to know. His name was Dino. And he had this long cigarette hanging from his mouth, you know, very, very Greek looking. He's, Elvis Presley? I said, yeah, I know some Elvis Presley. Blue suede shoes? I said, blue suede shoes? Yeah, we can do blue suede shoes, okay. Then we have to figure out what key it's in, and of course the Greek alphabet and the American. So he goes, do, re, mi, fa, so. I said, so, go, in Daxi. So we're going to do blue suede shoes in the key of so, in this taberna. Now, mind you, it's dark. I've turned the lights off on the stage. All people have heard all this time is that so that's what they're used to, whatever. And if you know blue suede shoes, you know it starts cold. So there's no musical introduction. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4, and I start singing 1 for the money, 2 for the show, like that. And everybody's jaw just drops. You know, all the silverware drops. You can just hear it. And I have this outer body experience. Like my soul comes out of my body and looks down on me and says, you will never be here again. Nobody knows. You can do anything you want. And so I just went nuts, you know. I did a full-out Elvis impersonation. I'm wiggling around. I'm dancing, going over the tables. And this resort was in such a little remote fishing village that I think half the people in the crowd thought it was original material, you know. Like, this boy is very good. Yeah, look, he moves around. Very good. Blue suede shoes. Yeah, like that. So I finish. I get this standing ovation from the crowd. I go back to the table with Peter Papadopoulos, and he says, that's it. I'm hiring you to be my singer and my piano player. And I say to myself, yeah, I am leaving tomorrow morning and going back home, and I'm going to tell everybody this story. And then he says, I'll give you $350 American every week. Have your own bungalow. You can eat all you want. You can use any facilities. Just sing half hour with the band, play an hour the piano. And I said, I can do that. The next morning, I flew back to Athens, picked up my backpack, gave them the youth hostel their money, and said, I got to go. I got a job. And I flew back over, and I performed that night and every night for the next 6.5 months. I had my own bungalow on the Aegean Sea. The water was turquoise. My tan was dark, dark, dark. I could eat anything I wanted, drink anything I wanted, never paid for anything because, as I say, this was in Agios Nikolaos, which is a fishing village. Now it's quite the resort, but back then it was very, very small. And so if I walked in town, if I rode on the mountain, people would drive up and roll down their window and say, Elvis, get in the car. Come on, we go. I was king of the island. And after 6.5 months, I quit like a fool so I could come back to New York City to start my very important career as a musician and take over the world as a musician. And I moved into a little hovel in Harlem and proceeded for the next 2 years to get doors slammed in my face and to have my music turned down and to have my songs turned down and to have to play in nightclubs in Greenwich Village and other places by bringing my own people in on Monday nights and paying for showcases and constantly forming bands or joining bands with old, crusty, cynical musicians whose dream, if it could ever come true, would be to move to an island like Crete and play music there all the time. Exactly what I walked away from. So, why do I tell you this story? Because things do happen for a reason. I'm working as a musician in New York. I work at nights. I'm playing in dive bars and things like that. I have time during the day. I go to a supermarket, and one time I pick up a newspaper. It happens to be in the supermarket. It's one of those things they give away for free. At the bottom it says, if you have free time, we could use some help with our newspaper. I have some free time, so I go down to this newspaper. I was the youngest person there by about 80 years. And they gave me an assignment that day. My assignment was to write a story about parking meters, why they were raising the price of parking meters from 5 cents to 10 cents. And my sum total knowledge of journalism at that point was having seen the movie All the President's Men. So I knew from that movie that you have a little notepad and a pen and you ask very aggressive questions. And so I went to this meeting and that's exactly what I did. And I said, why are you raising the parking meter from 5 to 10 cents? I got my answers and then I basically, I guess, mimicked what I had read in newspapers all that time. You know, the first paragraph's kind of a who, what, where, why, and then the second paragraph is a quote from somebody, and the third paragraph is a little bit more, and I wrote it up, and I gave it to them. The next week, I'm in the supermarket. I pick up this free newspaper, and at the bottom of the front page is my story with my little byline. And I read it, and I had two very profound feelings at that moment. One was, apparently absolutely nothing newsworthy had happened the week before. And so my story got on the bottom of the front page. And two, I created something. My name was on it, and these were my words, and I had written something. I had become the author of a small piece. And that feeling, even as I'm telling you this story, I can still feel today. That sense of, you created it, and there's your name, and there's your words. And I began to think, well, maybe this urge that I have for music and this creativity, maybe I can steer it into this and have the same sense of satisfaction. And basically, I became a writer that day. And I kind of stopped being a musician, or at least as a career that day. And I never wrote anything about music throughout all of my different incarnations as a writer until now. For whatever reason, I just thought that, you know, for me, music died when writing was born, and so I just never mixed them. But I've gotten old enough, and I've looked at life a little bit differently, and I realized that that was a switch of talents that had a very profound effect for me, and that everybody has the opportunity to sort of grab onto their talent and do the same thing. And so I created this story about this fictional guitar player named Frankie Presto, who is the most gifted guitar player on the planet. And you saw a little video that some of my friends in the music business, who I've been lucky enough to get to know over the years, helped me make to sort of blur the lines between reality and fiction. But I guarantee you that Frankie Presto was not real. Everything else in the story is real. And if you can indulge me, I'd like to just read you a couple small parts from this that will give you a much better idea than me talking about it. This is the very first page of the book, The Magic Strings of Frankie Presto. I have come to claim my prize. He is there inside the coffin. In truth, he is mine already. But a good musician holds respectfully until the final notes are played. This man's melody is finished, but his mourners have come a great distance to add a few stanzas. Let us listen. Heaven can wait. Do I frighten you? I shouldn't. I'm not death. Nor am I the great judge whom you all fear in the end. Who am I to judge a life? I've been with the bad and the good. I hold no verdict on the wrongs this man committed, nor do I measure his virtues. I do know a great deal about him, the spells he wove with his guitar, the crowds he enthralled with that deep, breathy voice, the lives he changed with his 6 blue strings. I could share all of this, or I could rest. I always make time to rest. Do you think me coy? I am at times. I'm also sweet and calming and dissonant and angry and difficult and simple, as soothing as poured sand, as piercing as a pinprick. I am music, and I am here for the soul of Frankie Presto. Not all of it, just the rather large part he took from me when he came into this world. However well used, I am a loan, not a possession. You give me back upon departure. I will gather up Frankie's talent to spread on newborn souls, and I will do the same with yours one day. There is a reason you glance up when you first hear a melody or tap your foot to the sound of a drum. All humans are musical. Why else would the Lord give you a beating heart? So that's the way the book begins. Oh, thank you. I have to say, you're a very easy crowd. Misty gets applause. One Page gets applause. I should come here more often. But as you can hear from that, music is the narrator of the book. And it was a fantastic experience to write as music, because instead of human beings observing and saying how much they love music, music gets to say how much it loves seeing human beings practice it. And it is one of many talents in the world, and it explains that when you're born, you come into the world, and before you even can see, when your eyes are closed, you can actually see while your eyes are closed. And what you see is a wall of brilliant colors, and those colors represent all the talents of the human spectrum that you could possibly possess. And when you clench your little baby fists for the first time, you're actually grabbing the colors that appeal to you the most, and those become your talents. So you wonder why you can play the piano and you can sing and you can do woodwork and you can do math. You grabbed it at the beginning. And little Frankie Presto is born in a burning church in Spain in 1936, and he grabs 2 big fat fistfuls of music. No one in the past, not Mozart, not Bach, not anybody, ever took as much music as Frankie Presto. And so music comes to his funeral to observe all the hosannas that are going to be thrown his way and how people are going to talk about him. And he decides to stay at the funeral and listen to what everybody has to say about Frankie Presto. And so we learn the boy's story. And we learn that he is born in a tragic circumstance in a burning church in Spain. His mother dies moments after she gives birth to him, and the only thing she does is give him a name and then sings a song into his ear called Lagrima, which is an actual song by Francisco Tárrega, who was a Spanish guitar player in this little town where Frankie was born. And then she dies, and he bounces around, and I'll explain to you in a minute why it's very important for me that he be an orphan in this story. He bounces around from person to person. A nun takes care of him. She can't take care of him anymore and puts him in the river and lets him float, hoping like he'll be discovered like Moses. And a dog pulls him out of the river, and a sardine maker finds him and starts to raise him up, and then eventually he won't be able to take care of him, turns him over. And at one point in his life, and this is critical when we talk about our talents, at one point in his life, he's brought to a teacher. And the teacher becomes the person who opens his eyes to his talent. And for Frankie, this is a blind guitar teacher, a former drunk who encounters Frankie in his apartment and opens the light for him. And this is the encounter when Frankie Presto, who's only 5 years old, is brought to this music teacher who's a kind of a crusty, old, blind Spanish guitar player. You'll forgive my accents, but I do the best I can. In every artist's life, there comes a person who lifts the curtain on creativity. It is the closest you come to seeing me again. The first time when you emerge from the womb, I'm a brilliant color in the rainbow of human talents. Later, when someone special lifts the curtain, you feel that chosen talent stirring inside you, a bursting passion to sing, paint, dance, or bang on drums. And you are never the same. It was a blind guitar player who did this for Frankie on a Sunday afternoon in the kitchen of a small flat on Christa Senegal Street in Villarreal, Spain. "Set 2 chairs across from each other," the blind man said that day. His sleeveless undershirt hung loose over his dirty tan trousers, and he did not wear shoes. "Now what, teacher?" Frankie asked. "Are you ready for your first lesson?" "Yes, teacher." "Good. Learn how to light a cigarette." The man pulled a crumpled pack from his pocket. His fingers found a single cigarette and he put it in his mouth. Then he took out a silver lighter and flicked it open. "You see what I did, boy?" "Yes, teacher." "You do it." Frankie did as told, then snapped the lighter shut. It fell to the floor. "Give me the cigarette," the man said. Frankie gave him the cigarette. "Pick up the lighter." Frankie picked up the lighter. "Congratulations. You have passed your first lesson." "Thank you, teacher." "Now what do I call you?" "Francisco." "Francisco." He grabbed for the chair, steadying himself as he sat down. "Like our great Francisco Tárrega, whose music you were singing." "I don't know him," Frankie said. "What? Stupid child!" He wrapped his hand along the kitchen table until he found an open bottle. He gulped a mouthful and slammed it down. "Why are you singing his music if you can't say his name?" "I don't know." "Again, stupid boy! Did the song write itself?" No.
Did it fall from the sky?
No.
No, that is right. It did not fall from the sky.
He snuffed out his cigarette on the kitchen table, then reached to find his guitar in its stand, nearly knocking it over. Frankie felt badly for this man, flailing around for everything. He wondered why he wore dark glasses if he could not see.
Listen now, very carefully,
the man insisted, hunching over the instrument, lifting its neck, placing his fingers by the frets.
Listen to the great Francisco Tárrega.
He took a deep breath and began to play. The song he played, of course, was Lagrima, the same one Frankie had sung by his door, the same one Frankie had heard, sung into his ear before his mother died. The blind man played it passionately with great care, pausing for emphasis, shaking his head at certain notes as if absorbing their smell. Frankie stared at the fingers moving deftly up and down the neck of the guitar. He heard the sweet, warm tones of the strings, the way the high notes seemed to blow gently across the lower ones, the way it sometimes sounded as if two people were playing at once. His mouth fell open slightly. The blind man finished.
Now tell me, boy, does that composer deserve to have his name remembered?
Suddenly, he felt two small arms hugging his neck. Frankie was resting his head on the man's shoulder, the way he once rested against his mother. Hearing Lagrima had lifted a curtain not only on Frankie's future, but on his past.
Get off me, boy,
the blind man grumbled. Frankie hugged tighter. The teacher could smell the scent of soap in his hair.
Look, boy, I am sorry I yelled, but you cannot go forward without knowing your history. Do you understand?
See, Frankie whispered.
How do you know that song, Lagrima?
I just know it.
Did your papa teach you?
No.
Your mama?
I don't have a mama. The blind man swallowed.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Can you see anything? Frankie asked.
No.
How come?
I just can't.
My eyes hurt sometimes.
My eyes do not hurt. I am blind, that is all.
Are you Francisco too?
No.
What is your name?
Get off me now.
The child pushed back and touched the man's face below his dark glasses. It was wet with tears. He returned to the chair as the man wiped his cheek with his palm, then fumbled again for the bottle.
You will call me Maestro, he said.
So that was Frankie's first encounter with his teacher. Thank you, okay. And he is taught by this blind guitar teacher who influences him until he has to put him on a boat going to America with a magic guitar that turns out to have 6 magic strings that can actually change people's lives. And whenever Frankie is in a certain situation and he plays so beautifully, he actually alters someone's fate. And the string turns blue. And then it disappears and it's gone, it's used up. So it goes from 6 to 5 to 4 like that. And we sort of see how music influences different people throughout the course of the book. Now the last part of it that I want to share with you is that in addition to creating this fictional character, I was able to call a lot of musician friends of mine and ask them if I could write as them in the book for a couple of pages. So some of the people you saw in the video, Tony Bennett, Burt Bacharach, Paul Stanley, Roger McGuinn, John Pizzarelli, Ingrid Michaelson, Darlene Love, and they let me write a few pages as them when they encountered Frankie. So it's sort of like Forrest Gump, you know, he's everywhere. He's in all kinds of things. He's with Duke Ellington's band. He is with Django Reinhardt. He translates for him. He sells Hank Williams, the car that Hank Williams ends up dying in a year later. He's with Elvis Presley at one point, and I couldn't resist that because being an Elvis fan and having been in Greece and done Elvis once or twice, I created this, and this is the last thing I want to share with you. So, a member of the Jordanaires, you know the Jordanaires? Jordanaires is Elvis's backup group. So a member of the Jordanaires tells a story at the funeral that he's been waiting his whole life to tell. About a time when Elvis was the backup guitar player for Frankie Presto. Frankie Presto was the backup guitar player for Elvis. And Frankie looked like Elvis and sounded like Elvis. And one time during rehearsal, when Elvis wasn't there, Frankie stepped up and just started singing like Elvis. And Colonel Parker, his manager, took a look at him very strangely, and everybody thought he was going to be fired, but he wasn't. And then they went on. So the story picks up with an actual concert that actually took place. You'll hear in a second, and I'll do my worst Southern accent because that's where the guy from the Jordanaires was from. Okay, so flash ahead. About a month later, we're on a tour of the Pacific Northwest with Elvis, and we're booked to play in Vancouver, Canada, in a football stadium. Well, we come to find out Colonel Parker's talking to the Army about Elvis getting drafted. The Army wanted Elvis to start his service, but the Colonel was desperate to get him to delay until he could get more records in the can. He got $1 million tiger by the tail, and he'll be doggone if anybody, even the United States government, is going to take that away. So the Army agrees to meet with Elvis and the Colonel, but it's a secret meeting, and it's in Virginia on the day we're supposed to play in Vancouver. And they're not budging because some big shot general's going to be at that meeting, and he wants to meet Elvis. So it's either meet that day or get a draft notice, I reckon. Now, most people would have just canceled the show, but most people ain't Colonel Parker. He didn't want to give up the gate from a football stadium, not for nobody. So that night before, up there in Vancouver, me and the fellas get called by the Colonel to come down to a little theater in midnight. It's empty, no sign of Elvis, just a stage with all our equipment. And the Colonel's already there with guess who? Frankie. And he's whispering, and Frankie's nodding his head. We don't know what's going on. Finally, the Colonel turns to us and says, I want you all to run through the show with that boy singing. And we look at each other like, what? But we don't say nothing. We do as we're told. We play, Frankie sings, and sure as I'm standing here, by the end of that rehearsal, if I shut my eyes, I couldn't tell if I was listening to Frankie or Elvis. That boy was so musical, he could have made a kick drum sound like a nightingale. You know what I mean? Still, we're wondering, how's this going to work? He looks like Elvis, but he ain't Elvis. But when we're finished, Colonel Parker says, now listen here. The boy's going to stand way back by y'all. He's not to come to the front of the stage, you hear me? And no talking in between the numbers. Y'all just go from one song to the next, fast. Then, of course, he added this warning. Any of you pickers tell one soul about this, I'll sue you so fast, your head will spin off your neck. He needn't have said that. None of us was giving up the Elvis gig. We had a tiger by the tail as well. So the next night comes, the real Elvis is somewhere in Virginia with the government, and we're out in Vancouver, Canada, in a black sedan, pulling up to the stadium. Frankie's in the back, sitting between us, dressed in that gold satin jacket, wearing sunglasses and being real still. I couldn't tell if he's super relaxed or scared to death. I was scared to death, I tell you that. I'm thinking, there ain't no way on God's green earth that we are getting away with this. But then we take the stage. We look at the fans, and they're so far away, up in the stands, and there are these sawhorses on the field that the Colonel set up, telling everyone they were for Elvis's safety. We got us a good 40-yard cushion. Nobody's getting close, which is just how the Colonel wanted it. I whispered to Bill, one of the other singers, what do you reckon? And he said, Clem, if it goes bad, run to the right. That's where the cars are. And then the announcer yells, ladies and gentlemen, Elvis Presley. And the place becomes just one big scream. And out steps Frankie, wearing that gold jacket and a black shirt, a guitar around his neck, high on the straps, the way Elvis wore it. I braced myself for something, people booing or throwing stuff, but it never happened. They believed it 100%. And Frankie stayed back with the Colonel, with us like the Colonel told him, didn't go out front where the cameras could catch him or nothing. Didn't do no talking neither, just started right in with, well, since my baby left me, you know, from Heartbreak Hotel. And from that point, it might not have mattered if Frankie, me, or Pearl Bailey was singing. It got so crazy you could barely hear a thing. And suddenly all them kids come running out of the stands and out onto the field. And Frankie tears into I Got a Woman and Rip It Up and Ready Teddy. And we're looking at each other smiling like bandits because he's good and we're getting away with it.
And the police are chasing the kids back up into the stands, but then they come running back onto the field again, and then back up in the stands. And with each song, Frankie's getting a little more and more into it, you know, doing some of Elvis's leg shakes and the way he thrust his hips. A couple times I shook my head at Frankie like, don't do it, man. Just lay back. Let's get out of here safe. But then comes Hound Dog. And I guess he couldn't help it. He just cuts loose. He pops out front, and he's shaking and windmilling his arms, and he's got that sneer on his lips like Elvis, and that just did it. The crowd mobbed the field, all of them. Police are trying to hold him back, and whistles are shrieking, and people getting knocked over. And as soon as Hound Dog was done, security rushes us off the stage. Frankie grinning and waving at the crowd like, bye-bye, see ya. 22 minutes. That was the whole show. 22 minutes. And we pulled it off. To this day, people talk about that concert as one of the wildest and craziest of Elvis's career. And the last one he ever did in Canada. And only the band, the Jordanaires, the Colonel, and Elvis's own self, God rest his soul, knew what went on. And Frankie, of course. He left the band the next day. I don't think he wanted to face Elvis. Maybe Elvis didn't want to face him. Either way, he was gone, and I didn't see him again for a real long time. Nobody said nothing about that night for damn near 60 years. But I'm 82 now, and Frankie's dead, so to hell with it. He deserves the credit. You think about all them people who became Elvis impersonators, made whole careers out of it. But Frankie was the first, and you got to say the best. I mean, if the point is to make people feel like they're seeing the king, he's the only one who ever really pulled it off. So there's that. So, thank you. So to wrap it up, the story goes on, and Frankie kind of loses his way. He starts to become a pop star. He puts his guitar in the closet because they say to him, you don't need a guitar, you're handsome, you're sexy, put the guitar away. And of course the guitar is his real talent. And bad things start to happen to him as a result of that, and he has a terrible tragedy at Woodstock, and then it tumbles off from there, and eventually he disappears, and he finds his way back to his guitar. It's not only a story about music, obviously, but it's a metaphor about talents, and the talents that we're given, and the gifts that we're given. And you know, in this country, sometimes you can feel that if your talent isn't singing well enough to win a national TV contest, or inventing a microchip that makes you $1 gazillion, or stuffing a basketball or catching a football, that too bad you didn't get any of the good talents. That's not true. Everybody's talent is a good talent. And the one that you're sort of meant to have, that one that you grab, if you find your way to and you practice it truthfully, you can influence the whole world. You know, if your talent is nursing and you take care of a patient with such care that when they get better, they're inspired to go into music, go into nursing or go into being a doctor, look at the life that you've changed. If you're a teacher and you inspire somebody to do something, become a teacher, look at the lives that you've changed. I'm walking proof of that. You know, I had a teacher who was so inspiring that I found my way back to him 16 years later and wrote a book to try to pay his medical bills, and now he's still teaching in different languages all over the world, right? Everybody has their own blue strings, and everybody can sort of play those blue strings and affect the world if they're true to their own talent. And the last thing I want to say about this, and I mentioned to you before, is about Frankie being an orphan. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I think fortunately, I've had a lot of exposure to orphans in the last 6 years. I took over an orphanage in Haiti just after the earthquake. I go there through Miami every month. I'm there 3 or 4 days. We have 40 children now. And a number of them were left with no alternative. I mean, they would have died if we didn't find them or somebody didn't bring them to us. One of the little boys was left under a tree when he was 2 months old with a distended belly, and he was crying in the woods, and someone happened to walk by, picked him up by the arm, brought him to the police station, and the police said, "What'd you pick him up for? Should have left him there. You know, now we have to do paperwork." And this child was eventually brought to us, and we took him in, and he's now 4 years old and thriving. We gave him a name. I don't know what his name is, and we'll never find his parents. But you think about what his life would have been if somebody didn't step in. And we created a little music room now down there where I got him a drum set and some guitars, and I see these kids with this amazing talent. We have some kids that are like really good. And you think, well, if you didn't come into their lives, you didn't offer them this, how would they ever thrive? How would they ever grow? And there's a line towards the end of the book when Frankie looks back on all these people who had to take care of him at different stages because he didn't have anybody. And he says he realized how many people it takes in this world to raise one child. And that's really true. And so I wanted this book to reflect that. And so when you read it, you can keep that in mind, and you can keep in mind one last thing. A lot of those musicians that I mentioned, after they participated in the book, they were so nice and they were so into it that they decided to make a soundtrack album. And they recorded songs based on the songs that I wrote about, which were fictional, Frankie's songs, that Frankie sang this, and he had a #1 hit with this, he had a #1. So they took the title, and they took the words, and then they created a song as if it were 1960 or 1962. So people like Nat Kearney and Ingrid Michaelson and Sawyer Fredericks, the kid who won The Voice, and John Pizzarelli and others, and they made these songs, so they essentially made remakes of songs that never existed. And there was one song that Ingrid Michaelson was supposed to do, and it was assigned to her called No, No, Honey. And 2 days before the record was due to be turned in, she called me from the studio and asked me about, hey, I want to make sure I got the lyric right on this song, Our Secret. And I said, you're not doing Our Secret, you're doing No, No, Honey. And she went, whoops, and it was too late. So I had an orphan of a song left and nobody to do it and 2 days to get it done. So in my head, I had heard this song as a writer. You know, I heard No, No, Honey. I heard a singer singing No, No, Honey, and some female background singers singing No, No, Honey, and he would say No, No, Honey, and they would say No, No, Honey. And I sort of had that, and I had in my head just this one music line. Is this still working here? Can we turn this back up for 1 sec? Yeah? No, you're the camera guy. Yeah? No? Okay, well, it goes da-na-na-na-na-na-na. Hopefully we have this thing here. So I had a guitar line. I called a bunch of musicians up. We got into a room, and in about an hour, without ever having met half these musicians, I played them this one line, and I told them kind of what I had in mind with this lyric and someone singing, and we all just got together in the language that is music, which you really don't need words if you just sort of sit around. And the result was this song here, if you have it. Hopefully, or I'm going to have to sing it a cappella. That's like a little guitar line. We threw that on there. And then we made up a verse.
Every time I know you've done me wrong,
We played a little rockabilly song.
your old song. You said, baby, don't be blue. I don't love nobody but you. Won't you take me?
And then we came up to the chorus, and this is how I heard the chorus in my head.
Say no, no, honey.
There's the guy. There's the girls. There's the guy. There's the girls. Girls. Then you come down, and you go to a stop just like Elvis would.
That I kinda mean, yes.
And we had a song. So 35 years after getting out of the music business, I finally have a record that you can get on iTunes or Barnes & Noble. So there it is. Thanks very much.
You ain't there, and I know you ain't home. Why you make my boat burst? Don't you know it really hurts? Why you wanna leave me all alone? I said no, no, honey. I said no, no, honey. I said no, no, honey. I said no.